For over 35 years, Todd Garner has overseen blockbuster films like Con Air, Anger Management, Triple X, 13 Going on 30, and the Mortal Kombat franchise.
Why are they letting you make these movies?
Join Todd as he shares tips and stories from the front lines of producing in Hollywood.
I'm Adam Sandler.
I'm Rebel Wilson.
This is Jeff Probst.
I'm Kaylee Cuoco.
I'm Eli Roth.
This is Marlon Wayans.
Hey, it's Ed Helms.
This is Shay Mitchell.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin James, and this is The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide with Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
What a combination.
Hey, welcome to The Producer's Guide, where we deep dive into the art of filmmaking and the future of Hollywood. I'm your host, Todd Garner, and today we have a special guest who's an expert in the art of independent international filmmaking. Tom Butterfield has spent the last 17 years as a producer and production executive, navigating the vibrant landscapes of both the UK and US film industries. His journey has taken him through a diverse range of production entities from Hollywood studios to independent companies and even government bodies. With experience at production companies like Zyde Perry, known for iconic franchises like American Pie and Final Destination, the UK Film Council, and Content Media, Tom brings a wealth of knowledge on how to get a script ready for financing and production. His impressive credits include films such as Man on a Wire, Adulthood, London Town, The Banker, and currently he's hard at work in post-production on Double Blind. Tom is not only a seasoned producer, but also a proud member of Producers United and the Producers Guild of America, as well as a national signatory to the IATSE labor union. And I wanted to talk to Tom specifically today about international independent financing, because we are in a global business, and I wanted to talk about, is the world changed, or is it pretty much the domestic world that's changed, and really get into how movies are independently financed, and are there alternatives to just making movies in the United States? Enjoy. All right, I'm here with Tom Butterfield. Hello, Tom.
Hi, good morning.
Fellow Producers United member.
Yes,
How
sir.
are you? How are you this fine day?
I'm good. I'm mentally exhausted after 18 innings of Dodger baseball last night, but otherwise I'm good.
I know. At the time of this recording, it was the tied for the longest World Series game in history last night. It ended at 12 a.m. Pacific time. Well, the reason why I wanted to have you on today was I really wanted to talk about something that you're really well versed in, which is international financing and production. We're in a very global business. There's just a ton of chatter and reporting about the death of the theater business in the United States and the demise of the business as a whole. So I just want to talk about the international space, international independent financing, and kind of where you see the global filmmaking community kind of headed. Because, what is independent financing and how does it work? And I finally did my first independently financed movie, which was a whole bizarre experience for me.
Yes.
Having worked on hundreds of studio movies. And then I would love to briefly talk about tariffs. We could talk about that. And then also just the kind of how production has been moving over to Europe and Australia and why. And so the movie business has been a global business since World War I. I mean, World War I pretty much wiped out the European filmmaking community. The United States kind of flooded in there, and really that was the beginning really of the global film community. And then for me personally in my business, where I really started to notice it, because I come from the studio side, which was really sort of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, the Avi Lerners, the Canal Pluses, the Cannes Film Festival. And so explain to me kind of just in layman's terms for people who don't know, what is the independent film international community? What are foreign sales? How generally does that work for people that have been hearing about it? Because there's also so many different ways. Like you hear about like a company that has recently gone bust that would put an actor in for 2 days and they could sell the whole movie around this big international star for 2 days. So there's also a lot of like tomfoolery, chicanery going on. And so just explain because you're obviously really well versed in this, what exactly is independent international financing?
Okay. I'll do my best to answer that. So the way that we look at it I think in the UK and probably mainland Europe. I can speak less to kind of Asia and the Indian markets. I think that in itself is a very different space. But certainly, let's call it English language, right? And mainland Europe. We've always called it the European model, which is, I define that as non-American studio kind of involvement. And I think you can add streamers to that now, right? So you're not getting your money from a traditional American studio. We're having to get it primarily through foreign sales. And when you say foreign sales, the simplest way of describing that is every country in the world is considered to be a quote territory, right? And you have a sales agent, and there are good sales agents and bad sales agents and honest sales agents and dishonest sales agents. But the hope is you have one who creates a sales sheet, and in that, every territory in the world is given a value, right? So to kind of keep it simple, let's say you have a $20 million action movie. You have your star, you have your director. A sales agent will kind of do some research and deliver you a sheet which shows the ask of what you hope you're going to get for a particular territory versus the likely number you're actually going to get. And they then go to generally a market. So there are a couple of film markets in the year. It starts with Berlin in the beginning of the year in February, Cannes, which is obviously an incredibly well-known one, in May, Toronto in September, and then we have the American film market, AFM, in November. And the sales agent goes and sells your product, your movie, to international buyers, okay? And you then can go, if whoever bites, you can then go get that paper financed either through a bank or through a lender. So you have kind of that component. You then have your tax credits, which is a huge part these days because the pre-sale market is, quote, down, i.e., distributors are not willing to be that aggressive. They are being, a lot of people are willing to sit and wait and see a finished film rather than take a chance up front. So the tax credits and them getting bigger in certain territories has made a huge difference. And then really you have equity, right? Which is that risk money, which is traditionally the hardest to find. It's, you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find someone who is real, legitimate, not an arsehole. That is an independent film producer's kind of day in and day out is building those relationships and finding people who are real and will actually get your film made. So in its most basic sense, that's kind of how you get it done. To your point, there's 1,000 different ways of doing it, but they all generally come in some version of that model.
So let's walk through the model. So you're aspiring or well-known film producer, and you have a script that you don't feel necessarily fits into the studio model. What is the best genre to get independently financed if you're a producer?
I think it's the really obvious ones. Horror always sells, action thriller. And I'm very happy to say it seems like romantic comedies are kind of making a comeback. Okay. I think the ones that are really hard are straight up comedy, because I think, American comedy is so specific. And European comedy has its own kind of flavor too. Drama is always hard because it's generally execution dependent, and people find it hard. And I think, if you do look at box office, both domestically and internationally, dramas are having a hard time making real money in the box office. And I think, it can't be underestimated the death of the DVD market and what that has done to the foreign sales component. I think, financiers were willing to take more risk because they had that support. But now there really is, I listened to a great interview with Jason Blum a couple of months ago, and he was talking about a film of his that didn't do as well as he had hoped. And he was talking about how there's just no bottom anymore. Like, it can literally be a zero. you can go from what you think a film is going to make to zero too quickly. And that's a problem. So sorry, that's a long-winded answer to your question, but I think it's probably action thrillers is the most obvious.
So let's say I have an action thriller and I want to dip my toe into the international independent space. The first thing I need, as I've been told a million times, is I need talent. I need the actor, which probably means you need the director to get the actor. And there are tiers of talent, which are shockingly surprising to me in terms of as somebody who came from the studio space. And as an aside, I will say every time there's been a new company that has sprung up and called me and said, I want you to come in. We are an independent finance company. We have all the money. We can just pay for the movies. Bring us your scripts. Always ends up with, well, you need an actor, and then I got to go do foreign sales. I'm like, well, everybody does that. You're literally no different than anyone else. You're just trying to cover as much of the budget as you can with these foreign sales numbers. So I've got an action thriller, and I say to my person who's going to go and sell the movie, give me a list of actors, and they break into tiers, right? So kind of just walk me through, not specifically who's on those tiers, but walk me through the tiers and why you think the tiers are the way they are. Because I think the general public would be surprised at some of the talent that's in the A. It feels like the international market is not lagging behind, but still really values big stars from 10 years ago. Perhaps. Walk me through kind of how those tiers generally are thought of by the foreign salespeople and also those distributors.
Yeah, so look, that's not wrong. I don't know if they're quite that far behind anymore. They certainly used to be. There was absolutely a period of time where they were hanging on to kind of the value of 80s, 90s action stars that we kind of all grew up with. They absolutely still held value. And I think that created the space for particular producers to go make those movies that you mentioned at the beginning, where you would have someone come in for a couple of days but would be on the poster and would be in the trailer. And that was enough to kind of get you financed at a particular level. In its most basic form, and just to kind of why I know this, my business partner is in foreign sales and has been for over 20 years. So it's kind of just by osmosis and our day-to-day arguments about talent that I think love creatively and he says has no value is kind of where I get my experience in this. But it's in its most basic form, foreign distributors are really looking for people who have opened theatrical movies. So, if there's an actor that has a big TV show that's winning tons of awards, that doesn't equate to them as theatrical value. And I think that honestly has been a huge separation over the last decade, because obviously TV has become so big and so prominent, but theatrical distributors don't give a shit about it. The very few people have managed to make the transfer from being on a big TV show to having foreign theatrical value, and even more so on the streaming side. So if you have someone who is a huge star on a streaming show, again, foreign buyers aren't interested. So I won't mention the actor's name, but there was a package we put together, action thriller, $15 million movie. We got the actor attached, we took it to Cannes, and what was fascinating that we learned was in the territories that had this particular streaming platform and therefore knew who this person was, we got multiple offers, really good kind of ask, take offers. In the territories that didn't have this streaming service, 0 offers.
Wow.
Because they did not see this person as having enough clout to deliver theatrically. So that to me, that was last year, that was last Cannes. So that I think spoke volumes to me in terms of where we are sitting in the foreign market. So yeah, I mean, look, our most ridiculous but important document that I own in my company is a list of names with value from various distributors around the world. And what we're always trying to find is the films that I make generally aren't A-list talent. I'm not making $75-100 million movies. So the tier that I think most independent producers live in, which is probably 20-25 and below, and really probably 12 and below $1 million, is you're trying to find those 3 or 4 actors who have the value but don't realize it yet.
Yeah, well, it's hard because they all realize it because the agents have those lists too, and they're getting every independent producer coming and saying,
"Well,
hey,
yes, but
my movie."
Yeah, Todd, but I would argue actually, again, what's interesting and frustrating at times is agents believe that they have someone who has more value than they do.
Always, that's their job.
And so, but again, what's super helpful to me and having a business partner who's in sales is, you can have an agent phone you and say, I love the script for so-and-so, and, but they're X. And I phone up my business partner. I'm like, okay, we've got this person, but they want this amount of money. He's like, they're not worth it. They're simply not worth it. Your budget will be top heavy, and then you're going to lose days for your director in order to make up the difference. So don't bother.
So does that data prove to be true? I mean, is it that in the international space, faces matter most as opposed to concepts, or God forbid, having somebody who's actually right for the role?
Yeah.
I mean,
doesn't matter.
So in the international market, faces still matter in terms of the selling of the motion.
100%. 100%. Faces first, genre and tagline second, and then everything else is probably a distant third.
And that then would equate to a lot of people chasing the same talent that may or may not necessarily be perfect for the role, but they need that actor to get the money to even make the movie, even though if they're not ideal for the role.
Yes.
Do Marvel movies and these big movies equate? So if you're
No.
in a Marvel movie?
No. It appears that audiences have now fallen in love with an actor as a particular character than the actor themselves.
I see.
So
Right.
so in growing up in the 80s, you went to see a Harrison Ford movie because it was Harrison Ford. Right? You went to go see a Tom Cruise movie because it was Tom Cruise. Now it appears you go to see a certain movie because you love Thor or you
Indiana
love
Jones.
Indiana Jones.
Right.
You associate that actor with that particular role. And when they go outside of that role, that doesn't drag your audience with you.
Or it doesn't drag the sales with you, at least.
Correct. So I think a good example was the film Challengers. If you saw that movie, which is essentially a 3-way love story, set around the world of tennis, and they put a huge, it was a big budget for an independent film, and what was really a drama, but they put a lot of stock into Zendaya's fan base, and that fan base would come across and follow her into that movie. And if you look at the box office, that didn't happen.
Right.
And I think one can argue it's because that they love her for particular characters and not
Got it.
as an actor.
So now I've got this list, and I've managed to procure an action thriller with a B-level star or stars and a director that can deliver in that genre. And then let's talk about now the next step, which are festivals. Because I think that a lot of people may think Sundance, Cannes, TIFF, AFM outside of that, but Berlin, those festivals are competitions where movies are screened and people win awards and dress up, and then you hear like, oh, this movie got a 40-minute standing ovation. But really, festivals are the place where a lot of people also are selling their wares. I'm bringing my action thriller script with my B-tier stars and my director to this to talk to all of the distributors around the world to try and get the paper that will give me some value so I can start putting my budget together.
Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, from a public perception, it's red carpets and black tie and nice dresses and 20-minute standing ovations, to your point. But yes, the underbelly of that is absolutely, it is, I don't really know how to explain it in suffice to say, it's really not a pleasant experience, the film market side of it. It's really, You are kind of, you're hawking your wares, and anyone who can afford a badge can get in, and it's 5-minute speed dates basically with distributors, and you're kind of running around various hotel lobbies. It's not, as my dad would say, the done thing.
Well, practically explain what it looks like. It is
So it's generally in a hotel.
Distributors renting hotel rooms.
Yeah, I mean, it's generally in a hotel, and distributors rent, and sales agents too, rent a room, and they're sitting in there all day for a week, and they have their posters up of whatever films they're selling or buying or whatever it may be. And I'm not kidding. It's speed dating. You go in with your however many films your sales agent is selling, and at times I've seen a sales agent with like a binder, and they're literally just kind of flicking through, going, right, so what are you after? What do you want? I mean, it's like kind of secondhand car sales and shit.
Right.
So we actually, our small little company, we really try and sell out of market or just before the market, so that you're not part of that kind of maelstrom of craziness. But it is essential to getting your film out there. And you see a lot of announcements in kind of in the various trades with our business, kind of leading up to each market, which are the big pre-buy names, and the PR machine kind of really kicks in generally before a market, to try and get people excited.
And in those festivals, when you hear like at Sundance, a movie sold for $20 million, right? That movie that is completed, that screens at midnight, that movie was not, when that movie was independently financed.
Yeah.
Generally, there's territories that are already spoken for when those $20 million sales, or they maybe just buy the whole world. So let's say the German distributor bought it for $2. If someone's going to take it off the table for the world, they have to buy out that distributor plus a VIG.
Yeah, it's called a kill fee.
When you hear about those, sometimes it's just domestic. Like when you hear about those sales on Deadline or anywhere else, it's not generally what we're talking about here. Those are completed films that now have kind of bundled up all the financing underneath it.
Yes. I mean, generally, again, going back to kind of how I explained the basic financing model, your hope is that your equity is against domestic, is against the US. Right? That's your hope.
So to explain that, you've sold off the world except for domestic, which would be United States and Canada, right?
Correct.
And so you're holding that back. Your equity, and we'll get in, that was the next question I was going to ask of what that means. But your equity then is filling that gap of whatever you didn't sell. And then now you have whatever the amount of money is to finish the movie. You're assuming when you sell domestic, you're going to make a profit, or at least get your money back on that, and then have profit down the line, correct?
Correct. Yeah, exactly right. So when you see those, so to your point, when you see those kind of Sundance-y type sales or those big festival sales, one of two things has happened. Either someone has come in with such a big number that you can buy out your foreign distributors with what's called a kill fee that's normally negotiated kind of ahead of time. That is becoming less and less popular, and foreign distributors are getting quite pissed off about it these days, because they're like, hey, we took the risk. We jumped into bed with you. We need product for our market. So that is becoming harder, but it's also you're seeing, I think, a lot more, particularly in the American festivals. These sales are really just for domestic, which is where you really hope you can get some upside.
So I've gone to the festival, I've got my package, I've sold it as best I could for the rest of the world, and I still need some money. Where do I go now to get that money? Because this is where it gets really, really shady for me. This is where it's like, these are all the companies that I've gone through that I'm like, how the hell do they have all this office space with no movies? And these are the companies that generally show up for a couple of years and then disappear because they realize, I don't want it. It's like a lot of high net worth individuals. It's people that love movies. It's people that think they can game the system. Explain to me what the equity means and gap financing and all of that.
Okay, so gap and equity are two different things within the same thing. So gap is generally money that comes out first and is considered kind of safer So there are a lot of senior lenders out there who will lend against your pre-sales, lend against tax credit. And as part of that bundle, they offer what's called GAP, which is basically saying, let's say you have $10 million of pre-sale and tax credit on your $20 million movie. They say, okay, well, we will give you a gap of another 2 because you have enough territories, you have domestic available. We see enough coverage in what you have left to sell that we feel comfortable giving you a bit more.
Is that generally a percentage or a relationship or past experience?
I mean, it's both. It's generally a percentage. I mean, I think again, senior lenders are becoming more restrictive on how much gap they're willing to do and who they do it to. A lot of that, I think, has to do with how volatile the domestic market has become. Most senior lenders will do it. Banks, who are obviously the cheapest in terms of lending cost, don't do gap at all, to my knowledge anyway. And if they do, it'd be very small. They're not about risk. They're about just give me the paper. But they're the best deal in town in terms of their rates. So you have to, as a producer, you have to kind of balance that out.
And then equity is all the
and
things
then
you
equity is just total at risk. It's, to your point, it's generally random people, high net worth people, a company that will kind of pop up for a year, get totally annihilated, and disappear. Because look, I mean, the independent space, it's very hard to make your money back. I think you have to be really upfront about that when you're talking to people about this type of investment. I think, interestingly, I've been doing this 20-ish years. And in that time, I would say the people I've had the least success with is real estate people, because they're just how their brain works on a day-to-day basis. They buy a piece of land, they build something on that land that has value, they sell it. That's kind of how their brain operates.
Right.
And the film business is so different. I've found it pretty much impossible to get them to wrap their head around that risk profile. The most success I've had is in oil or people in that sort of world, because there is that kind of drill a hole, 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 find something.
Right.
So there is that more kind of speculative kind of approach to investing, which is more in line with our business, certainly on the indie side. So, but within that, there are good people and there are not so good people. Right. And I think an independent financier really has to lean on their lawyers. And I think, to me, that relationship is the most important relationship I have, is with my lawyer, to really help and guide me to make sure that we have, me personally, my company, and the film that I'm trying to make has the most protection it can.
Well, I would also say that it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy as well, because like we said earlier, it's a forced genre looking for the same pool of actors that may or may not be exactly right for the movie.
Yeah.
And everyone's trying to push these same kinds of things into the marketplace, which feels a bit stale and generic at times. It's flooded with people that are trying to outsmart the game by baking out risk. And anytime you attempt to bake out risk, you generally go to the lowest common denominator or the most general version of it, which is not very rarely the most inspired. And so you're actually weirdly baking a lot of the creativity out of the process in this whole process we've described up till now, which then obviously doesn't make the most inspired movies and therefore don't make the most box office. It's this cycle that we find ourselves in. And what's very interesting is, I've always known it was this way in the international space. And there are people that are really, really good at it and make really cool stuff, especially in the action space when I was growing up in the business. But what's very interesting now is the domestic studio business is now mirroring that. They're trying to bake out risks. They're trying to find the answer. They're trying to go for the genre they think is the most appealing to the biggest amount of people. They're casting people they think will help them sell the movie as opposed to who's best for the role a lot of times. So it's the whole business now on a global level is really kind of acting the same way. And it comes from, like you said, the difference between a wildcatter and a real estate developer is one is trying to make make sense to the way they do business, which is I build something, I make money. There's no bottom, right? I have a land value and I have a cost value of materials and labor, and somewhere in there is my profit, period. That definitely does not work that way in movies.
No.
And so if you have tech people, real estate people, business people, VC, any sort of finance people, they're trying to make it make sense to them. So they're trying to shoehorn the art into that box. And then in giving the box to the audience is like, I don't want that fucking box. It feels like a boring commercial generic box. I want something more exciting. And the wildcatters are over there going, hey, let's take some shots. Let's make stuff that's interesting. And I think that stuff inherently has a better chance of succeeding anyway.
I don't disagree with that at all. Frankly, I think the caveat to that is producers and directors who are willing to take creative swings within the right genre and therefore recognize they probably won't have the budget to totally pull it off, but get close enough that it's interesting enough to grab your audience. So to give you an example, the film I'm in post on now, we have an actor who's our lead who is phenomenally talented. I mean, I really believe is going to be one of the actors of our generation. He is a black actor, which in itself is an issue for foreign. Unfortunately, that is just the case. But we knew that we were making an action thriller, but what made it difference was hopefully the performance this person was going to give us.
For sure.
But my director and I had to conscientiously make that choice. I mean, we were told very clearly what his value was going to be internationally, and it wasn't much. So we had to go, okay, we're going to make this film in 20 days rather than 25 days. And there's an action set piece which we need to totally reconfigure because we won't have the money. Now, ultimately, I'm very happy and proud to say I think the film is turning out great. And now whether it cuts through the noise and is actually seen by people is a whole different conversation. But I think that's the choice one has to make in the indie space is, what can you get done for how much? Because no one fucking cares if you made it in 12 days or 25 days. Right. An audience doesn't give a shit. We can all sit around and pat ourselves on the back and be like, oh, I made this film in 15 days. And other people just go, oh, wow, that's incredible. My dad doesn't fucking care. He just wants to watch a good movie. Right. So that's the compromise.
You also can't say to your dad, we didn't have enough coverage here because we were running out of light.
Yeah, he doesn't give a shit. So and I kind of love him for it, frankly. But because he's right. I mean, why should they care how the sausage is made? They just want to see a good product. And I think, I would say no one goes into trying to make a bad film. I hope that that's true. But there are kind of times along the way where that can happen because of various circumstances. But to me, the most exciting part of being an indie producer and why I want to continue being an indie producer is that the creativity that comes out of those limitations. I talk to my directors every time we start a movie, and my kind of spiel is that I give them a box of time and money. Right? We as producers, we're given a certain amount of time and we're given a certain amount of money. Now that can come from a studio or a streamer. It can come from wherever it comes from. You have your budget and your budget is it. So that box can never break. And your job as the director is to bend it and push it to breaking point, right? With your creativity. So within that box, we can do whatever we want. And it's my job to support you in achieving that. But I can't let the box break. And I find real joy and thrill and excitement in the creativity that brings. Whether that ends up making a great movie or not, the process is really the fun is a fun bit.
Well, and why you get along with the oil wildcatters best is because you yourself are that, right? We're always optimistically betting on ourselves. Like, well, if I make this movie for less, there'll be even more profit when everybody comes. So we'll make more money. And we're all dreamers. That's why we do this. And we're all trying to make the best thing we can for the least amount of money. Because it is our job as producers is we're the intersection of commerce and creativity. And it's our jobs to make sure that we maximize profit. And I don't want to go into all of the nefarious characters that are in this that own, like you said, nobody goes out to make a bad movie. That we certainly don't. Good producers certainly don't. But there's a ton of guys out there that are snake oil salesmen, cannot tell the truth, lie to you constantly, just are 100% singularly focused on lining their own pockets. As best as we can, stay away from those people as best you can.
And look, I think that's an important part of producing is creating that community that can give you the heads up. And I'd say as a Producers United member, it's one of the things that I've absolutely been so pleasantly surprised and loved within our community is that producers are normally kind of pit against each other, right? Because there is only enough slots, there's only enough money, there's only enough actors. And whilst that's true, it doesn't mean that we all have to hate each other. And we all have, I was thinking a lot actually to our very beginning of the conversation about the baseball. I do kind of see us as a baseball team. We have our own personal stats and our own personal goals, but there is kind of a team thing here. And I think being able to kind of lean on people and be like, hey, have you heard of these guys before? Do you know if, and someone going, oh yeah, don't.
So that's the most important thing I found is that when people fuck with us, it used to be that people could fuck with us because we were alone and we built walls around each other. So I'm like, fuck it, I can fuck with Tom. What's he going to do? He's right. And then now that we're all together and we talk a lot and we have these open line of communications, those people that lie and those people that try to fuck with us are going to have a much harder time because we're able to say, hey, let's take care of each other because the business is hard enough. We don't have to work with people like that. Yeah. Right. It's like, it's hard enough to make a good movie, let alone make a good movie when someone's lying to you constantly and trying to get one over on you all the time.
Totally.
We don't need to deal with that.
Totally. And I think, it is that I find myself constantly having to be, I know I'm not curing cancer, but, when you're kind of explaining it, because again, all people really care about, going back to my dad, is it a good product? Am I going to enjoy it? But there is, within it, it is Herculean to get an independent film made. I think actually even to get a studio film made these days, it's an incredibly hard process. It's really three-dimensional chess in getting everything to line up. I mean, all the stuff we've just been talking about, is purely the financing side. We kind of glossed over getting the actor or getting the director and finding them available. When are they available? Is their agent going to actually let them read it? Are they going to try and use you to kind of get a bid for another movie up? Are they going to? It's really kind of getting that alignment of money and schedule and talent. There's a reason why most indie films take years and years to make, and it's not that it's bad. It's really timing and all of these things. It's pretty incredible.
All right, so now we're going to make the movie. Why are so many movies being made overseas? What is your assessment of that and not in Los Angeles or even in Atlanta anymore? Why is everything in the UK and Australia now?
Well, okay, so there's two reasons. One, and whether people want to discuss it or not is irrelevant. I mean, it's pretty factual. Number one is, as I mentioned at the beginning, because pre-sales and that independent financing model is becoming harder, you are always looking for, quote, free money, right? And the best free money is tax credit money, whether it's a tax credit or a grant or a rebate, whatever version of it you want it to be. In various countries and states within the US have different versions of it. It's really about spending money in that place and then getting money back from the local government or national government. A lot of countries have seen it as a way of really bolstering the film industry there. And, domestically, Atlanta and Georgia really saw an opportunity now, 15, maybe even 20 years ago, to really grab hold of the US industry by creating this tax incentive. And everyone flooded there. And, billions of dollars have been generated from that. Studios were built and Marvel camped there. But internationally, people have kind of caught up. The UK, obviously where I'm from, the new tax credit there for the $15 million and below, £50 million and below, that's a 40% tax credit on that. That is a huge number for an independent film. If you're making a £12 million movie and you're getting 40% of that back, that's gigantic. So how as a producer, can you not recognize that, right? How can you look a financier in the face and say, I want to shoot this movie in LA with its 25% tax credit, when you can easily, when the creative doesn't necessarily have to be there, you can shoot it in London and get 40%. It's like, what are we talking about? I mean, it's just basic maths. So there's that component, which is huge. And then the other component, unfortunately, is American unions. And I want to be I have a union contract. I have no problem with unionization or with basic rights. In fact, it's something we're trying to do for producers too. But the reality is that those unions come with incredible cost. And there are some films that simply just can't sustain that. The budget can't afford it. So, those unions don't exist in other countries. And so you put those two things together, there's generally a pretty significant swing that again can't be ignored when you're asking someone for money.
And look, not to get into the politics of it, but the idea of tariffs, the idea of it is not wrong. I mean, if you're trying to drive business back to the United States, the idea of tariffs feels like it could work. The problem is we're a service industry. What constitutes American made versus if it's an American company that's making something overseas, but it's an overseas location, it just complicates everything.
But again, sure, tariffs conceptually, sure, but in something that, how do you tariff an intellectual property? How do you? I mean, it's like it's not to get into the politics of it, but
it can't. Look, it can't. That part of it can't work for our business.
No, but what we should be looking at is more reasonable and competitive answers. So, for example, a federal tax credit.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I think a federal tax credit that you can then put on top of a state tax credit. Now you're really talking, right? I mean, and by the way, that's nothing new. I mean, Australia does it. Other countries around the world have some version of it. So
Australia does it, and most of my last 3 movies have been shot in Australia because of it. And here's for people who don't understand it, just a very high level look at it, is there's a state rebate and a federal rebate in Australia. And if there was a state tax rebate and a federal rebate in the United States, it would make us more competitive. The other issue is states like California don't have it all the way through the budget. It's only below the line because there is this notion that above the line doesn't need it. Like, why should we give Tom Cruise money? They're not understanding that Tom Cruise doesn't get the tax credit, that producers and studios and distributors are going to go where the money is cheapest, go where they can make it the cheapest. And so if we could be competitive, we can bring movies back to our state, and it would trickle down in so many different ways. It's between just letting people live in their own state, bringing industry back here, the cleaners, the dog, all of the people that service. Sure.
I mean, the spider web is significant. I think, kind of two things. First is also just, I'm not sure how well versed your listeners aren't what that above the line means, but essentially above the line is your actors, your director, and your writer and producers. And obviously, generally, the kind of the high-paying people, right? Particularly the actors these days. And you're absolutely right. Some states allow that to be counted in the tax calculation, and others don't. But I think there's also, not to get too into the weeds in it, that there's a big distinction between a rebate versus a credit.
Right.
So California, for example, the reason they didn't include the above the line in our recent changes is that they felt that they would just run out of money too quickly because there's only a certain amount allocated, by the California government. So whilst I agree with you that above the line should be considered, I do understand why California particularly said no, because otherwise, but
one movie could take it out. I mean,
exactly.
Like one big Marvel movie could take it out, and what they want is 20 smaller movies. But listen, here's debating. Debating the rebates is not what I want to do with you. What I think for me, it should just be a movie comes in, there is a percentage of the budget, and the federal rebate also is a percentage of the budget, and then all the states can decide if they want to. So one state might be 10%, one state might be 20%, and then federal will match it, or however the federal rebate works. Then everybody can decide apples to apples where they want to make the movie, right? And so I just think that all of these different things complicate the system so much that it's just easier to go to Europe where the dollar's stronger, labor's cheaper, they're very talented, and you can get just about every location.
Yeah, I again, I don't disagree with you at all. I think, what we're talking about, hopefully, is a 10% federal incentive in that sort of zone. And I think if you put that onto almost any, whether it's a credit versus a rebate, well, it's not irrelevant, but it's you put that onto most states in this country are at least 20%, if not more. And I think you can then get really competitive if you add that federal 10%. Because obviously, really, we want to make the film where we want to creatively make the film. But we too often have to go and make something work somewhere else, and compromise creative for the financial.
Yeah, and just bringing movies back to Los Angeles, where the Hollywood was born, and the tourism, and I can't tell you how many. I've made so many movies in Australia, and I joke that they're going to start doing Hollywood tours now because I can see the locations in other movies. I'm like, I've shot in that location in the Gold Coast. I know, and I'm supposed to be in American City. It's just again, the spider web is vast, and we can get into that. And I'll get into that in a whole other episode. But then, okay, so now your movie's done. You have it finished. You still have your poor equity guys hanging out there, and now you have to sell it. And pretty much the thing is you're just trying to maybe wrap up a couple other foreign territories, either sell it purely domestically or wrap the whole thing up in a big bow for the world.
Yeah,
and that generally happens at festivals, but increasingly not. Correct?
A lot of it depends on what it is in terms of the genre and the level of star that you have in it. Getting those festival slots and those screening slots is becoming harder. A lot of it now, I think COVID had a huge amount to play in just online links and that sort of viewing experience, which is a shame in my mind, but it is the reality. I wouldn't say gone are the days of a whole bunch of distributors sitting in a screening and watching something together, but it's not as frequent. And yeah, I mean, it's at these markets that we've already mentioned, and you sit there with bated breath, waiting for the phone to ring and for distributors to be like, right, loved it. What do you want? What's the price? What's your asking price? And obviously, ideally, the big cherry on top is a domestic sale.
And here's the last problem I can see in this whole process. So now you come out, and whatever festival it is, maybe not the festival so much, but at least in terms of the year-round buyer experience, if everybody is making action thrillers with the same 7 actors, Don't you just have all of the movies sort of look the same? I mean, again, this is the problem. We are all trying to make the same genre in this way, trying to make the same genre with the same, let's say, 20 actors. There's only so many ways you can chase a car or blow up a building or fight a guy. Doesn't it sort of feel at the end of the day that these buyers are just sort of watching the same movie over and over again? And isn't that also part of the problem when we're trying to make the audiences excited about what we do?
That's a great question.
Sorry, this is my experience of seeing it from the outside.
No, look. It's hard to argue against, because yes, in theory, you're absolutely right. What one hopes is that you have, within the genres that you're trying to make, that you how you get to the end within the story is new and interesting and different. And again, I think my answer to that is it's about the talent that you get and the performances that you get, because, let's be realistic. If you're making a sub $20 million movie, your action's only going to be a certain way. It's probably going to be, in camera. It's probably going to be real stunts. You're not leaning on visual effects and those sort of things because you just can't afford it. So then what's the story? And actually, it's something that I'm really focused on now, is I think we in the indie space just got really lazy on story. And so yes, I think with that, we're kind of becoming a Law and Order almost. But I think, if you can find action movies that have good story, good character, I do think that those break through. And, I'm really, again, you look at the films of the 80s and 90s, Die Hard is considered an action movie, but there's only really, 4 big set pieces in that movie. It's really about Bruce Willis and his performance and, Point Break, which I will happily say is my favorite film of all time. That's really about Keanu and Patrick's relationship and how that works. And then you have some really great, 3, maybe 4 action set pieces, and one of them is probably the best foot chase ever captured on film. But it's a foot chase. It's not VFX. It's not, So yes, you are right. But I would hope that there are people who are trying to, within the story of what they're doing, can separate themselves from the target DVD version.
Here's what I'm hoping. Anybody who's listening to this, who's a real estate developer, who's going to finance a movie, you can't game the system. So everything is a risk. Everything. You can think you're going to make the most generic action thriller with your top level A- star and a great director. You can still lose. So fuck it. Make great shit. Make stories that inspire you, and make movies that entertain you, and go for making something that's going to be a genre buster or break through the clutter, since it's all a risk anyway. And we have not been able to, as a business since the 1910s, baked out risk. Fuck it. Enjoy the risk, take some swings, and maybe you'll be that one hole that will be a geyser. That's the thing I'm trying to get people to understand is, the more we try to make this real estate development or tech apps or any of that bullshit, the more we're going to continue to just keep squishing down the business till it's just mush, all looks the same, and somebody from TikTok is more entertaining. So stop it. Try to just embrace the risk and just enjoy it, because you have just as much chance of losing money on a movie that you paid Bruce Willis one day to be in as you do taking a risk on a cool filmmaker, on a cool story with an actor that you love that's perfect for the role, that'll break that person out and become a star. That's my rant for the day.
No, look,
that I will continue to scream to the rooftops until it changes.
Look, we're shouting from the same pulpit. I think, it is that thing of the tipping point, in the sense of single film financing, you're almost always going to lose. Whereas if you actually are willing to spend more and go, okay, I'm willing to spread money over 5 movies, that's really, I think, how you get that real estate developer that we're shouting at to kind of understand. Because if you can spread your bet, if you're going to sit at the table in Vegas and you can afford to sit on 5 seats, you're more likely going to win than just sitting on 1. So I think that's something that, again, with the financiers I'm talking to at the moment, of let's not just look at this as a one and done. Let's look at this over a series of movies that, worst case, 1 covers 4, right? But you just, again, it's just simple maths and probability of hitting that, of landing that hit. So,
and take interesting swings. Don't just bet on 5 generic movies with people that are just going for the lowest common denominator and the snake oil salesmen that lie to you and tell you that this business there's ways to game the system. I remember early days going into a company that said they early days had an algorithm that could figure out hits. And I was like, okay, that's never going to work. And it didn't. The company was out of business in 2 years.
Yeah.
Or so take just interesting things that speak to you that just you think, I would love to see that in a theater. That's as good of a chance as any of this stuff to make money.
Sure. And look, again, I really am focused. I keep on aging myself, but I really grew up in the 80s and 90s where kind of action thrillers were great entertainment. I do think we are also fighting in a sense of Hollywood kind of feels like we have to lecture everyone about all the time with our movies. So, I do feel we've slightly lost the entertainment side of our business a bit. And I do think that I have no problem going and making an action thriller. I just want to make a really fucking good action thriller. And to me, that's where the risk is, right? I can show you as a financier that the genre makes sense, but let's go make a really good one. And that's exciting to me.
Hey, there was really good ones in the 80s and 90s. All right, so in terms of advice for somebody that wants to enter into this space as a producer or as a filmmaker, what's your advice to people wanting to go and climb this hill?
There's a couple I've been really, I kind of knew you would ask me this question. I've been really thinking about it since you first asked me to be on this. And I think that obviously I can only speak for myself, but I will say there's a couple of things. Number one is whatever you're doing, you have to be passionate about it. And it's very easy as an independent producer to just say yes to multiple projects because you feel like you need to. You feel like you need to have a lot of, strings on the bow. You need to be. But I will fully admit there have been times when I've taken on a project because of a relationship or because I kind of liked it, but it wasn't quite. And I wasn't excited about it when I woke up in the morning, and that was wrong to the movie and to the other people involved. And I've got much better, I think, at just going, look, I love this, but it's not for me. Because if you can't get up every day and be super excited about it, how are you going to last the distance that a lot of these things take to make? Again, on average, my films have taken between 4 and 5 years to get made. And, there are days in that when you're just like, fuck it. So I think you have to be so passionate about whatever story you're telling. I would say number 2 is, and I mentioned it before, is get the best lawyer you can financially afford, because they work for you and, it is their job to protect you. And I think, building that relationship and that rapport is essential. And I think finally, if you think the script is done, read it again.
Right. I mean, that's my thing. Every day I would try to wake up and say, okay, can I make this movie 10% better today? Is there any way to make this day 10% better? This page 10% better?
Yeah. And again, in the indie space, it's so hard, man, because, as I mentioned before, in this 3-dimensional chess, you're like, oh my God, it's lining up. The actor's lining up with the money, which is lining up to but the script isn't quite there yet. but this is your chance to finally get paid after 5 years of work and doing it for nothing. It's unbelievably hard, and producers bend over and get their fees cut or get them held back, or don't do that extra polish on the script because that it might be another 5 years before this comes back around. So right. I'm very cognizant of that, and I experience it myself all the time. But I do think as I've got older and done it more, being willing to take a breath. And it doesn't mean you don't still go ahead with it, but just taking that breath and going, okay, is it the best version of what I can do? I would really hope that people take that moment. But again, I appreciate at times it can be really hard.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Thank you so much for your time today, Tom. I always end with the same question. Best memory on set?
Am I allowed to give you two?
You can give yes.
Okay, I'm going to give you two.
By the way, I don't know if you figured out this podcast doesn't have any rules.
Well, one is just a really fun anecdote, and the other one I think actually speaks to what we've been talking about. So the one that we've been talking about is I was on set for my second ever American movie as a capital P producer, and I had this incredible award-winning gaffer. And for people who don't know, gaffer is kind of head of the lighting department. And we were sitting in between takes and chatting, and I said, God, isn't it funny that this is my second film as a capital P producer. I've been on set. I've been on a number of sets as an executive, but as your boss, I've done like 50 days of real-time experience. You've probably done that in 6 months of your ridiculously successful career. And he looked at me and he goes, well, what does that fucking tell you? To which my response was, stay out of the way. He's like, exactly.
Amazing.
And he was right. He's like, underneath that note was, you're not here to get in my way. You're here to support me and help me do the best job I can. And I think it was I'm so thrilled that it happened so early for me in that process, because it was very clear. Producers, yes, we technically are the boss, but in terms of actual practical experience, these people who are more on kind of the quote labor side do it day in and day out, all day, every day. And, and I think, you take ego out of it immediately.
And good on you for having those conversations, because a lot of times people that come on set just bury themselves in Video Village, don't talk to anybody, don't get the experience of making the movie and learning from everybody on set. I mean, I try to talk to everybody.
It's super fun. I think great. One of the things I think of great producers are you're a people person. You get on with people, because most of our job is putting out fires. But I'll tell you quickly the other story, which is amazing. So I was on a film as part of the producing team on a film called The Banker, which was with Sam Jackson and Anthony Mackie and Nick Holt. And it was the first day, and we only had Sam for 2 weeks. He was a smaller role. And I'd never met him before. And, we had kind of nice conversations through the day. We were both kind of sitting there. And there's a whole scene in the movie where he's teaching Nick Holt's character how to play golf. And so we're filming on this golf course in Atlanta and moving around. And we get to the end of the day, and the director's like, great, okay, we're done. And Sam is like, no. We need something in the bunker where Nick is kind of just hacking away at sand, and I get sand in my face, and I give you the Sam Jackson face. and the director's like, what do you mean? He goes, well, the face, kind of, what you paid for, the Sam Jackson face. He's like, well, okay. And Nick had already left. He'd already wrapped. And he's like, well, that's fine. Just do the reverse on me, and then you can get Nick hacking away tomorrow. And like, okay. So I need someone to just throw sand in my face. Just have a tight on my face and have someone throw sand in my face. And so, well, we don't have a stunt team. He's like, fucking stunt team? Get that English guy. Where's that English guy? He'll do it. And so I come over. He's like, hey, would you throw sand in my face? I'm like, sure. Okay, yeah. So I spent half an hour on my knees in in a bunker, just launching sand into Sam Jackson's face.
Amazing. Those are the days, man. That's what we do it for. Right? You're not going to get that sitting in your desk talking to some foreign sales agent.
No,
that's amazing.
It was a moment.
Amazing. Well, Tom, thank you so much. Appreciate your expertise and
my pleasure.
Knowledge about it. And you're such an incredible addition to our group over there. So really appreciate you.
No, thank you so much. I'm very honored to be on. I had slight imposter syndrome with some of the people that you talked to on this podcast. So I appreciate being asked. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in for this episode of The Producer's Guide. If you're a fan of this podcast, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends and family. And if you got any questions about producing, send me a DM on X at Todd_Garner. I want to thank my producer, Steve Delamater. And until next week, I'm Todd Garner. See you then.